everyone, and welcome to the Balanced Bodies Blueprint. I am your host, Vinny Russo.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Eryn Stansfield.
And we're shifting gears from all the conventional fitness narrative you hear on most fitness podcasts, as our main emphasis lies in preventative healthcare, adopting a holistic approach to nutrition, and challenging the traditional views on various fitness topics.
Our mission with this podcast is to provide you with the information you need to achieve optimal health.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing something that seems to have a lot of heat in both directions, especially coming from the medspa side and the biohacker side. So we're going to be talking about methylene blue. Seems to be this new big thing going around, and we're going to decide whether it's a miracle molecule or some biohacker BS. The real question is methylene blue great or good to use for brain health, energy, and aging? Because that is what that's what's being pushed on why you should take it and add it to your supplement stack. So what we're going to do today is Dr. Eryn is going to do her thing with talking about the medical side of it and the use of it, and if it even should be used. And I'm basically going to touch on what I see influencer, what they peddle, and also what these quote unquote biohackers are pushing out there to the general population. So, Dr. Eryn, what even is methylene blue? Because a lot of people are acting like it's some hidden gem that big pharma is trying to suppress from the general population.
Sorry, I just rolled my eyes. So I haven't even talked about methylene blue, I think, since residency. We use it as an antidote for cyanide poisoning. Anyway, methylene blue has been around forever, since the 1800s. It came from a German lab. It is a coal tar derivative, and it was used, hence the name, to stain textiles. By the 1890s, it became a medicine. It was one of the first synthetic drugs. It was used to treat malaria and some urinary infections at the time. In fact, during World War II, soldiers joked about it because they would pee blue after taking it. But the paradox is that it laid the groundwork for modern antimalarials and antipsychotics. And many of its original uses were abandoned because we had better drugs and that had fewer side effects, excuse me. And today, the FDA only approves it for two things. So if anybody else is trying to use it for other things, they're likely wrong. The two things that the FDA says that it can be used for is methemoglobinemia.
Say that 5 times fast.
A blood disorder where oxygen can't bind to hemoglobin, which is some of that antioxidant properties that it may have, and a surgical dye. We use it, surgeons use it to locate lymph nodes. It's used a lot in breast surgery, for example. And like I mentioned before, it's an antidote for cyanide poisoning.
So this is legitimately a drug, and it's not some wellness hack.
Correct. But a lot of what you won't hear from the wellness influencers is that it is usually given under care of a physician. It's usually administered intravenously in hospitals under strict monitoring. The doses vary. Obviously, the standard dose is 1 to 2 milligrams per kilogram, for example, which may be lower than many of the biohackers use. Even at medical doses, 15 to 20% of patients experience side effects like blue urine, nausea, and dizziness. I think you would know more than I would about what is being pushed on social media, since you were the one that brought it to my attention, that somebody was actually using this for other purposes.
Yeah, so I put out a post, and basically it was knocking methylene blue usage because there's no significant evidence behind it, except in like really, really niche populations that you'll get into. And I was having this back and forth with this person for a while. Went on all day. And I don't even want to get into it, but the guy's a fool. He really is. He was talking about all his accomplishments and what he's in charge of and all this nonsense. I'm like, okay, but you still haven't provided any legitimate evidence to back your claims. So this kind of fueled the route that we want to go down in this podcast. But when you look at it, people want to latch on to mechanistic theories, right? Like methylene blue will support the mitochondria, right? And it'll turn into this miracle cure. And it completely skips any of the human data that is presented.
I think it's funny that like wellness influencers or whatever they are that put these treatments forward, that they're always like find the oldest treatment that was, around in the 17 or 1800s that hasn't been used and forgotten, and they bring it back.
It's like bell bottoms, right? They're coming back.
They bring it back into style.
But like, so one example that influencers like to peddle here is they like to push that there's this mitochondrial enhancement to where it's going to boost ATP production, which is then going to boost your cellular energy. So you're going to have more energy for yourself throughout the day. And the thing is with that, at least from what I looked into, is that can be seen in cell cultures and some animal studies. And we can see this because low dose methylene blue can actually bypass damaged parts of the electron transport chain, which theoretically can help ATP production. But in humans, it's not seen. We don't have strong data yet. So there are, from what I saw, there's no large randomized control trials showing that this translates to any improved physical or any improved cognitive performance in healthy people. So it's not completely made up to where like it can work, but theoretically it can work, but it's not validated yet.
Yeah, so what I saw after looking into this a little was that there are areas of emergent research, which you touched on a little bit. Neuroprotection is one of them, which there is this theory that it can enhance mitochondrial function. They're looking at stroke models for that, for example, cognitive health. They have looked at patients with Alzheimer's, for example, and then there's some antiviral potential, for example, SARS and COVID stuff.
So what about this cognitive function and neuroprotection you just kind of said? So, because I know right now there is a lot of buzz around methylene blue saying that it can improve memory, it can prevent Alzheimer's, things like that. But what does the science actually say for that stuff?
Yeah, so what I did find in humans, because I didn't look at the animal stuff, I treat humans, not animals, so that's what I looked at. So I found a pretty good review actually that included human randomized controlled trials in Alzheimer's patients, and we can probably supply the PMID if people are interested. But
we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, the 5 out of the 6 RCTs that basically they looked at demonstrated that methylene blue enhanced cognitive performance and decreased beta amyloid plaque buildup, which is a characteristic of Alzheimer's disease in the brain. So the research findings indicated that the administration resulted in enhanced memory and cognitive abilities among those diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it is believed that inflammatory and oxidative damage in the brain contribute to the progression of Alzheimer's disease. So basically, essentially, they're saying that there was some anti-inflammatory and antioxidant
capabilities.
Thank you, of methylene blue in this setting, and it can mitigate inflammation. However, there are adverse events, and even it was highlighted in this review article. And the existing studies have limitations with small sample sizes, short treatment durations, and obviously dosage and administration route differences. So there's not a lot of consistency even with these studies out there yet. Again, this is very early in these studies to look at, and these are patients that already have Alzheimer's, so they're already experiencing some memory issues, and so they actually have some pathology, right? So again, that's why they're trying to use these treatments that maybe there's nothing else out there for these people, and this is like a treatment that they can actually look at.
Just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, because again, under good monitoring, they are administering it and then monitoring the adverse effects too. Which, if
it is administered, you should be under care with somebody that is able to adequately monitor adverse outcomes. Methylene blue could function as an alternative mitochondrial electron transfer carrier. That's kind of the theory. And it could enhance cellular oxygen consumption. However, most of the mitochondrial studies of methylene blue are in vitro still. And like you alluded to, animal models, and I didn't look much at those.
Yeah, I think it's just an important note here, and you just kind of alluded to it, that these studies that do show promise, they're going to be with very niche groups. Like these are people that you just talked about that are already suffering with Alzheimer's. So there, like you said, there is a pathology, right? And you would know better than me with the research, but I mean, I really haven't found any benefits for people that are considered healthy.
Correct. Yeah. So there's no good evidence for that, right? There's, in fact, and there's more contraindications and risks with that. There's not really good evidence, and we'll get into it later. But
well, let's go into it now because you kind of brought up the antioxidant feature of it and how it could be anti-inflammatory. But I've also heard that it can also be used as an antidepressant. Now, I do understand that, basically from what you were saying too, it can modulate some oxidative stress, and it does this by donating and accepting electrons. But I'm almost positive that with the antidepressant stuff, that should be really considered BS. So I'm not sure. I kind of want you to touch on that. And also, what about the dosage? Like, does that really matter? Like, what if you go too high? What if you're doing too low? Because you kept saying low dose. So, yeah, kind of dive into that.
Well, I don't think you should be dosing this unless you're under care of physician and you're getting it IV. So there's already there. That's kind of and hopefully you're using it for an FDA clinical diagnosis, the physician is at least. I don't know much about the antidepressant properties. I didn't look into that as much. I did look into the contraindications and risks, though. There are a number of them actually that are pretty serious. So there's a G6PD deficiency. Basically, if you have this deficiency, which a lot of people don't even know if they have
I was just gonna say, how do you find that out?
It's a blood test that you get, and it's a genetic issue usually. But if you do have this deficiency, you lack a certain enzyme. And if you actually take methylene blue, there's a high risk of hemolytic anemia. So that is a big risk factor. And I think if you don't know what your G6PD status is, you probably shouldn't be administering methylene blue to yourself. Serotonin syndrome, this was a little bit more serious as I feel like there's a fair number of people that might be on SSRIs. So the recommendation is to avoid methylene blue if you are on an SSRI because you can actually have MAO inhibition. And we'll get into it later and we'll talk about serotonin syndrome. Pregnancy is another contraindication. It can lead to fetal intestinal damage. So things to consider when somebody's talking about this, like, if they're saying, oh, it's a supplement, is you want to know the route of administration. It's usually primarily IV, or it should be as a treatment. And it's usually for very acute conditions, the two that I talked about that are FDA approved. Also, if you are administering this, the physician or whoever is caring for you, hopefully a physician, should be monitoring your liver because it does have some hepatic metabolism, and you can also get methemoglobinemia rebound risks, especially if you're taking sulfa drugs with it. So again, off-label uses require strict medical supervision. This is not something that you should take lightly as part of your vitamin stack. You should always consult medical guidelines, hopefully, to look at drug interactions and make sure that you don't have any of these other medical issues that might interfere with this particular drug.
Okay, so we're talking about how, or we keep touching on, or you do, how it is used, but it's mainly going to be used in like the hospital setting. So we know that there are some science-backed uses for methylene blue. So why don't you go into what exactly they are? Just so I know you touched on them earlier, but just kind of
Yeah.
give a little bit more info.
So again, FDA only approved it for 2 scenarios: methemoglobinemia, which is a blood disorder where oxygen can't bind to hemoglobin, and a surgical death. And that's
And the cyanide?
it's used an antidote as for cyanide. I don't know if that is an FDA approval or not, but it is used as an antidote.
All right, but what people need to understand here is that when it is FDA approved to be used, it is used in the hospital, right? Now, because of this, because it's used in the hospital, wouldn't that imply that there are some pretty serious risks that these self-prescribing influencers are overlooking? Like, I know when I was having that back and forth with that guy, he basically said it was safe. Toxicity only happens at high IV doses. So if they said that to you, how would you have responded?
So yeah, I think the route and dose do matter. What I did look into is I've never even heard that you could take oral methylene blue, but apparently you can. So it can be considered safe, again, at very low doses. But it's usually used for diagnostic purposes, like food dye during swallowing exams. Um, I saw a systematic review where they looked at 1,900 patients receiving oral methylene blue, and they only had 3 serious adverse events. Again, that was true methylene blue in their oral administration, where I would argue that a lot of these supplements, you don't know exactly what is in them. Is methylene blue in them? At what concentration? At what dose? I don't think we really know because there's no regulation over supplements.
Well, the problem with that, I don't mean to cut you off. The problem with that is people always think more is better, right?
Yeah.
So let me take more and more and more
Yeah.
if it's going to help me, and that's not necessarily.
It's not going to prevent your dementia. Yeah, we don't know that yet. So I think you know, so taking it orally, it could be okay, but it could not be okay. Again, harm can occur at very high doses. Adverse effects usually occur, like for example, at 7 milligrams per kilogram. That's associated with an increased risk of toxicity. Therapeutic doses below 2 milligrams per kilogram are generally considered safe. There's a number of drug interactions. I think that's the biggest thing here. That if you're on an antidepressant, what kind of antidepressant are on? Do you know that? Because you shouldn't be mixing it with an SSRI. The serotonin syndrome that could occur is potentially life-threatening, and it is characterized by confusion, muscle rigidity, and autonomic instability.
Well, I will say, you just said you talked about the SSRIs. So people that need antidepressants are taking this, but they're saying that it can replace antidepressants. But my thing is like if you have people that need this antidepressant, need something to help with their depression, they're most likely taking the SSRIs, which
Correct.
means that the
It's
population.
counterintuitive,
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly what I'm
Very
getting at.
dangerous.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't experiment on myself to
Yeah.
replace my SSRI with something like this. Probably not going to be effective. There are special populations, like I said, people with G6PD deficiency, that are at risk for hemolytic anemia. This is a big deal. Other side effects could be allergic reactions, and then central nervous system effects such as confusion or agitation. And again, there's zero supplement regulation. There's no regulation with supplements. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know what you're taking. It is a big deal. The FDA, for example, recommends that if somebody is getting methylene blue and they are on SSRI, they have to have a 14-day washout period between antidepressants and methylene blue. So again, there's specific recommendations when it comes to administering. These are not drugs that are without harm.
Yeah. And then how would you even know like that, like the 14-day washout period? That's crazy. But you touched on serotonin syndrome, and it seems to be pretty serious. So why don't you kind of explain to our listeners what that is?
Serotonin syndrome is like it sounds. So it's caused by excessive serotonin activity in the central nervous system. It can result from drug interactions, which is most common, combining SSRIs with MAOIs or methylene blue, overdosing serotogenic medications, so medications with serotonin in them, basically antidepressants, opioids like tramadol, and then a rapid dose increase too of any of those serotonin drugs can cause serotonin syndrome.
Wow. Yeah, pretty damn serious if you ask me. Well, I saved the last claim to fame that what I saw on the internet with what methylene blue can do, and what's being peddled. And they're saying that it can help with mitochondrial dysfunction, also known as like mitochondrial disease. And apparently everyone is like self-diagnosed. Well, I'm not sure if it's the same, right? I'm not sure if it's mitochondrial disease. Well, what they say. From what I got, from what I understand.
I'll stop you right there.
Hold on, wait. From what I understand, from what I read and what they're pushing, is that it sounded like mitochondrial dysfunction is their term for mitochondrial disease. So that's sort of what I got from it.
I don't even know what mitochondrial dysfunction actually means. I understand mitochondrial
Well, it's their term.
disease,
Yeah.
because that's a real medical thing, right? There's mitochondrial storage diseases that are genetically inherited. These are very serious diseases. There's ways to diagnose those. Usually go to a specialist, and they require biopsies a lot of time. So that's a very serious thing. Would you ever treat a mitochondrial pathology with methylene blue? Probably not. I haven't read that or seen that. Dysfunction, I don't even know what that means. I don't even know how you measure mitochondrial dysfunction. To me, that medically, that doesn't mean anything. You had alluded to the fact that maybe these people suffer from fatigue, for example, or like some of these wellness people are saying, oh, well, if you're really fatigued, this might help, like give you a pick me up or something like that. The differential diagnosis for fatigue is enormous. So if you're thinking right off the cuff that you need a supplement with methylene blue in it, I'm pretty sure that's going to be probably, an appendix A of possibilities that it could be.
Why don't you fix your sleep environment? Go to bed a little bit earlier and work on that. But yeah, just my thoughts on it. And you touched on this just a second ago. But I feel like people are using this mitochondrial dysfunction as like a catch-all for feeling tired or feeling run down. So it's almost like you have methylene blue and that's your quick fix that you can add to your supplement stack. So when I hear people say like, I think I have mitochondrial dysfunction, which I never heard, but I have read it on forums on the internet when I was looking this stuff up. And I've also saw that medspa clinics recommend it. I'm just like, so you're feeling tired, so they're going to prescribe you methylene blue and it's going to help you? Like to me, that's not how this works, right? I think there's a huge difference between I'm tired and my mitochondria are failing. Like I think there's a huge difference between the two. So if you're not getting muscle biopsies and metabolic panels, then I think you're just guessing and leaning towards that new, sexy, shiny object, which is methylene blue now.
If you're not seeing a specialist that can do a muscle biopsy, I wouldn't be saying that you have mitochondrial dysfunction.
Well, long story short, to anyone and everyone who's tossing methylene blue into their supplement stack because you heard, Gary Brecka on some podcast or your medspa clinic said that you needed it just after they performed, like a cryogenic eyebrow freezing. I'd say if you wouldn't casually dose yourself with something like chemotherapy or blood thinners, then don't play biochemist with methylene blue. The science isn't settled, at least not yet. And until it is, this isn't health optimization. It's guessing at best, but at worst, it could be pretty damn dangerous.
Great.
So on behalf of Balanced Bodies, we just want to say thank you for joining us on this episode of the Balanced Bodies Blueprint.
We are committed to bringing valuable content. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd greatly appreciate it if you can take a moment and like it and leave a 5-star review.
On Apple, just go to the show, scroll down to the bottom and rate it there. If you're on Spotify, go to the show's page, click the 3 dots, and you can rate it there as well.
And if you believe in the power of knowledge, share this episode on your social media to try and get the information out there to as many people as possible.
And as you navigate your own path towards better health, remember that Balanced Bodies is forever in your corner. See you all next week.
The podcast content may include discussions of medical topics and health-related information. However, the information provided should not be considered exhaustive or complete, and it should not be relied upon as a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment.